90% of the world's oil deals, 60% of global reserves, and trillions in daily trade all depend on the US dollar. But the dollar's power isn't built on gold or assets, just collective belief. If that faith cracks, the title of this story, "The Dollar is Dying," stops being theory. So what really holds up the currency behind every major transaction on Earth, and how close are we to seeing it unravel? 60% of the world's official foreign exchange reserves sit in US dollars. This isn't just a statistic, it's the backbone of global commerce. From oil contracts in the Middle East to loans brokered in Zurich, the dollar is the common language of money. Central banks from Tokyo to Sao Paulo hold stacks of US Treasury bonds, not because of any law, but because nearly every nation accepts dollars as payment. The world's largest shipping companies, energy giants, and manufacturers all settle their accounts in greenbacks. Even when two countries trade goods that never touch American soil, the invoice is often written in dollars. This dominance isn't anchored by gold or any physical asset. The dollar's strength comes from a network effect. So many use it because everyone else does. Economists call this self-reinforcing power, where size and acceptance feed on each other. But beneath the surface, it all balances on trust. Trust that the United States will honor its debts, keep its markets open, and maintain stability. There's no vault holding enough gold to back these obligations. Instead, the world accepts dollars because it believes in the promise behind them. History offers reminders that empires once thought unshakable lost their grip when confidence faded. The dollar's reach is vast, but its foundation is invisible, a consensus that could, in time, shift. In July 1944, delegates from 44 nations gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to rebuild the shattered global economy. Their agreement fixed the value of the US dollar at $35 per ounce of gold. Other major currencies would peg themselves to the dollar, and in turn, the dollar would remain convertible to gold on demand. This arrangement placed the US Treasury at the heart of world finance, promising every dollar was as good as gold. The system's creators believed this would anchor trust and prevent the chaos of competitive devaluations that haunted the pre-war era. But the promise contained a flaw. As Europe and Japan recovered, demand for dollars soared. The United States began running persistent deficits, sending more dollars abroad than it had gold to cover. By the late 1960s, foreign central banks held far more dollars than the US could ever redeem. The world's faith in convertibility became a delicate balancing act, one that could not last forever. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon addressed the nation in a televised announcement. He declared a temporary suspension of the dollar's convertibility into gold. That single decision broke the metal link. The dollar was no longer a claim on gold, but a claim on the promise of the US government. From that moment, money was no longer anchored to anything tangible. Each crisis would now demand another dose, another expansion of credit, another round of promises. The era of restraint ended, and a new era of dependency on faith and on debt began. America's ability to borrow on an epic scale is not an accident. It's a feature of the global system, built on the world's hunger for dollars. The U.S. national debt now stands at over $34 trillion, a number that grows by the second, its movement tracked by a relentless digital counter. This mountain of IOUs is not a burden in the traditional sense. Instead, it's a business model, underwritten by the rest of the world. Foreign governments, central banks, and investors hold more than $7 trillion in U.S. treasuries. They buy these bonds for safety, for liquidity, and because the dollar remains the world's default store of value. But the mechanics run deeper. When the U.S. issues debt, it exchanges paper promises for real goods and services from abroad. This privilege, known as seigniorage, allows the United States to consume more than it produces, year after year. Offshore, the eurodollar market has swelled to nearly $16 trillion, multiplying the reach of the dollar far beyond American borders. As long as global demand holds, deficits feel painless. The Treasury borrows, The Federal Reserve manages the flow, and investors around the world keep buying. Yet history offers a warning. Ancient Rome debased its coins to fund endless expansion, hollowing out the value of its currency. Britain, once the world's banker, saw its pound lose reserve status as debts mounted and confidence waned. The US model depends on the willingness of others to keep lending, and on the belief that the dollar will always be worth what it promises. If that faith falters, the cost of borrowing could spiral, exposing a vulnerability hidden in plain sight. A middle-class family stands at the checkout, watching the total climb higher even though their cart holds less. In 2022, the Consumer Price Index reached nearly 9%, the sharpest spike in 4 decades. Paychecks stretched thin, savings eroded quietly, and the promise of stability faded with each trip to the store. Gasoline, rent, groceries, everything costs more, but wages rarely keep up. This is inflation, a silent tax that punishes those who work and save, while rewarding those who borrow and speculate. For millions, the dream of progress slips into anxiety as the essentials of life grow more expensive month after month. The pain is easy to overlook in statistics, but impossible to ignore at the kitchen table. In the Weimar Republic a century ago, money lost value so quickly that a loaf of bread could double in price between sunrise and sunset. Today's erosion is slower, but the mechanism is familiar. When governments print money to cover promises, the burden falls hardest on ordinary people. The middle class becomes collateral, their labor and savings quietly siphoned away. Inflation doesn't announce itself with a crash. It creeps in, hollowing out the value of the dollar, one purchase at a time. The cost of living rises, but the true cost is trust in the money itself. While the dollar remains the world's default currency, a quiet transformation is underway. The BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has begun constructing parallel systems designed to bypass the dollar entirely. The New Development Bank, headquartered in Shanghai, now finances projects in local currencies, reducing member reliance on US funding. China's cross-border interbank payment system, or CIPS, enables global settlements in yuan, with daily volumes rising steadily, though still a fraction of SWIFT's reach. In 2023, the Chinese yuan accounted for nearly 5% of global trade finance, more than doubling its share in just 3 years. Central banks, especially those facing Western sanctions, are turning to gold. According to the World Gold Council, official sector gold purchases topped 1,000 metric tons last year, a record. Russia and China lead the charge, using gold both as a shield against sanctions and as a foundation for new settlement mechanisms. BRICS expansion now includes major energy exporters like Saudi Arabia, raising the possibility that oil and gas could soon be priced in currencies other than the dollar. Each of these moves chips away at the dollar's monopoly, creating new pathways for trade and finance that no longer depend on American approval. Confidence in the dollar's supremacy is not lost in a moment, but fades with each new doubt. In 1967, Britain devalued the pound sterling from $2.80 to $2.40, a 14% drop that sent shockwaves through the world's financial system. Sterling had once been the backbone of global reserves, but years of deficits and eroding trust made its fall seem inevitable in hindsight. Central banks, once loyal holders, rushed to shift their reserves, accelerating sterling's decline. The lesson was clear. When belief slips, the exit is swift and permanent. Today, the dollar faces a quieter erosion. Central banks experiment with digital currencies, like the mBridge pilot linking China, Thailand, Hong Kong, and the UAE, searching for ways to settle trade without touching the greenback. These pilots remain small, but their meaning is unmistakable. Trust is the real reserve, and once it begins to slip, no amount of printing power can fix broken trust. The dollar's story is not one of sudden collapse, but of slow, self-reinforcing fade. In 2024, the US dollar still accounts for about 60% of global foreign exchange reserves, according to IMF data. But every major turning point revealed in the story, from the 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement to the suspension of gold convertibility in 1971, shows how trust, not material backing, has always been the real foundation of its power. This documentary traces how decades of debt and persistent inflation have chipped away at that trust, and how new global systems, like BRICS, financial networks, and rising gold reserves, are emerging in response. Some records, like future central bank policy plans or classified agreements, remain unavailable, leaving the speed and shape of this transformation uncertain. Yet the evidence is clear. When nations and markets lose confidence, even the most entrenched currencies have faded. The dollar's story is not unique. History shows reserve currencies are always vulnerable when faith gives way to doubt.